This cable is killing me.
CGQ Plus.
So I thought it would be a nice idea to upload a nice long episode on Super Bowl Sunday so that all you guys who don't want to watch the game have something else to watch. You know, maybe you're stuck at somebody's Super Bowl party or you're home with your family. Everybody else is watching the game. Now you can take your phone out and on the sly watch some Classic Gaming Quarterly. So what I wanted to do this time, I was talking a lot about the PlayStation in the last episode, which was the Q&A video, and I mentioned that I had just hooked my PlayStation back up, and I just kind of had PlayStation on the brain for that reason. And so I thought, what better time than now to sort of do like what I did with the Genesis stuff and just kind of talk about all my games and why I have them and stuff like that. Before I get started, I just thought it was kind of cool. I also mentioned in the last, was it the last episode or 2 episodes ago, I'm not sure, that I had started going back to thrift stores again and looking for stuff, and mostly just finding sports games. And last week, for some reason, because I had the PlayStation hooked up, I've been playing some NHL '98. That's probably my all-time favorite hockey game. And I was home alone, and my wife was still at work, and for some reason, I just thought, like, I'm going to play this game, and I'm just going to keep tweeting as I'm playing it or taking pictures or stuff like that, just for fun. And it was interesting because I really thought nobody would care, like, for whatever reason. But people seem to like it. And one guy out there, a viewer of the show and follower of the show on Twitter named Joe, who lives in Michigan, is like me, a Wings fan, and started talking to me a little bit. And he made a comment about how he wants to pick up a copy of NHL '98. And it just so happened that the last time I was at the thrift store, I saw a copy there. And it kind of bummed me out just because I liked that game, but I didn't need another copy, and so I left it. So when he said that he wanted a copy, I just figured, well, I'm going to go back and I'm going to rescue that copy at the thrift store, and I'll just send it to him. And while I was there, so the copy didn't have a very good jewel case. And I couldn't remember where I had stashed my supply of extra jewel cases, although I subsequently found them. But so I was basically looking for something else that I could swap out the case with, because they just have like a huge shelf full of CDs. And so I was just trying to find something, and I would just swap all the guts out. And so I'm like pulling all these CDs out to check them. And some of the CDs didn't have the back insert, and I was like, well, hey, that makes it even easier. And so I'm pulling these out, and I find like one that doesn't have a back insert, and it's a 3DO game. I was like, wow, like what? I'm not sure I've ever seen a 3DO game at a thrift store before. And I was like, well, that's pretty cool. And then I'm just thinking, like, man, now I have to check all of them, because what if there's more 3DO games? And I ended up finding one other one. So again, they're kind of both sports games, but although I like Olympic sports games like this, they're pretty fun. So this is Olympic Summer Games. It's for the '96 Olympics in Atlanta. And then I found Slam and Jam '95, which I'm told is good. I posted a picture up on Twitter, and my buddy Peter said that this is a good game. So I when I posted the picture, Joe said, oh, I'm glad you found some other stuff to make your trip worthwhile. But I thought the story behind why I found this stuff was a little bit interesting too, because if NHL '98 had had a good case, I never would have found these. So that's kind of cool. But anyway, this is probably going to be a pretty long episode, because I'm sure I have a lot of things to say about a lot of these PlayStation games. So enough talking about other stuff. We should probably just get started. I get a lot of attention about my long box games, because a lot of people like to collect long box games, and I guess I do too. Part of it is that for some reason I'm really fascinated by like the early days of different video game consoles. I think that's why I'm into doing like these launch videos. Is it's really interesting to go look at the early days of a lot of consoles, because a lot of people don't have experience with that. Like, statistically, obviously, most people buy consoles when they hit a certain level of popularity, and I think for the PlayStation, I'd have to say that was like 97, 98. So like I got mine in 97. But anyway, I think we should look at those first just because they're the oldest, and there'll be some games over here that are like sequels to these or whatever. So I'll move the camera over a little bit to center them. That way the Finnish people can see their favorite sign, and we'll get started. So I tried to put these, I started putting these in rough chronological order as I did with the Genesis games, but I don't think I've gotten quite as far. So first here I've got my launch games. I've got Toshinden, Rayman, the Raiden Project, Ridge Racer, and ESPN Extreme Games. So those are the only 5 launch titles I have. The only launch title I can think of that I wouldn't mind having that I don't have is NBA Jam Tournament Edition. Although I do have that for the Japanese Sega Saturn, believe it or not. Like, I wouldn't have even thought that that came out in Japan. Although I don't know why I would have thought that, I guess. But I bought a lot of Saturn games off somebody, and that came with it. But it would still be cool to have the PlayStation version. That was actually one of my favorite games to play for that launch episode. So, and I should also say, so you know, somebody made a comment to me about having all these games, and you know, I think the person was just trying to you know, jovially bust my chops a little bit. You know, because I just got done saying how, you know, you shouldn't keep things for the sake of keeping them and not, you know, whatever. And so I will say that, you know, I'm planning on doing like a PlayStation in 1995 video. And once that's done, I think probably some of these games are going to be leaving because there's definitely games here that I don't really want to hang on to. But I'm keeping them for that sake for now. So like here I've got Mortal Kombat 3. I think I mentioned this. This is actually the only Mortal Kombat game that I even own. I used to have Mortal Kombat, maybe Mortal Kombat 2 for the Genesis, but at this point, this is the only one that I have left. Next to that is Air Combat. Now, if I remember correctly, I think Air Combat was the first long box game that I ever got, and it wasn't until much later. I think I got this one in like 2003 or something, or 2002. I found this at a GameStop. They had like a bin, because of course, you know, this early 2000s, they were still selling lots and lots of PlayStation games, but they had like a clearance bin, and this was in there for a few bucks, and so I thought that was kind of neat. When I bought my PlayStation, it was 97, and they weren't putting out games in long boxes anymore. By then, they were in jewel cases, and to be honest, at the time, I didn't think they were stupid. I didn't want long box games. So like, for instance, I would have preferred to buy like a greatest hits copy of a game just to get it in the jewel case versus having to have this. And the reason for that was simply that I had one of these, I'm sure, you know, some of you guys that are my age know what I'm talking about, but it was like this Case Logic brand CD case that, you know, had an inside tray that was plastic that had the little slots for all the games or CDs or whatever, and then it was like had an outer thing that was like padded that you could zip up, and I used to keep that underneath like the TV stand in my room. So I wanted all my games to fit in that, and so I didn't want long box games. So I think I wanted to buy Destruction Derby, I remember, you know, back sometime in 97, and I went into a Good Guys and they had it in this long box, and I was like, I don't want that. And so I think I waited for it to come out as a greatest hits game so that I could get it that way. Next here I've got Jumping Flash, and I bought this. I remember I bought this game. I ordered it on eBay, but while I was on vacation, just because I was sitting around one night and I just wanted to get this game. That was when I was working on the launch of the Nintendo 64 video, and I knew I wanted to show some footage of this game, just because, you know, a lot of people consider it to be like the first 3D platform game. Although, like I said in that video, it really kind of wasn't, but I mean, it still kind of has a special place in history, I think. And so, you know, obviously I could have burned a copy of the game and just run it on a modded PlayStation, but I don't have a problem with it. I don't have like some moral thing with it or anything. I just prefer to have original copies of the games. And plus I just figured for its historical value, this is a game that I'd probably want to hang on to. So like, for instance, Mortal Kombat 3, obviously I want to play it more and see if I like it or not, but you know, that's the kind of game that I might not want to hang on to. Another one would be like Warhawk here. I mean, it's kind of a neat game. It's it's not a sim. I was gonna say it's like a helicopter sim game, but it's really not. But you're flying around in like an attack helicopter. It looks kind of like an Apache, if you see on the cover there. And I don't know. I played this game and it was kind of like okay, and I remember reading like a review of this in a game magazine, but probably not a game I would really hang on to. So that one might be heading out the door. Next here, this is a game I would definitely not get rid of. This is, of course, the original Tekken. Sorry for the glare. There's not really a whole lot I can do about it. So, I kind of wonder about this game, because this game came out in 95. I'm really not sure when in 95. But, if you bought a PlayStation at launch and you had Battle Arena Toshinden, I feel like Tekken would come out. And, you'd obviously want to get that. And then maybe you'd kind of feel like, sorry you bought Toshinden. But, I mean, Toshinden is more weapons-based, and, this isn't. And I'm sure I made a comment in the launch of the PlayStation video about maybe Toshinden being like the PlayStation's answer to Virtua Fighter. But really, Tekken is more the answer to Virtua Fighter. And, so if you were looking for a game like that, then I think you'd much prefer to have Tekken. Next, we got our first sports game, PGA Tour 96. I actually wrote a review of this game for my website forever ago by Hitmen Productions. I've actually never heard of them. This is actually a good game, in my opinion. If you like golf games, which, as I've said many times, I love golf games. And this is a good one. It's better than PGA Tour 96 on the Genesis is not good. But it's the only golf game, EA golf game on the Genesis that isn't. They're all the other ones are good. But I thought this one was a really solid game. So... again, a game I would definitely want to hang on to. Next, we've got Alien Trilogy, which it's like a first-person shooter that I'm really not too into. Probably won't hang on to that one, but we'll see. WrestleMania, the arcade game. This game is sort of okay. I'm not really a wrestling fan. I know there's a lot of wrestling fans out there. I used to like wrestling when I was a kid, but I think I just kind of outgrew it. This has like digitized graphics, which I think is kind of not cool. Like if I want to play a wrestling game, I'd rather play like a 16-bit wrestling game. So this is another game I might not hang on to. Can't really imagine keeping FIFA Soccer 96 either. But one of the cool things about old, early sports games on the PlayStation is that a lot of them still used sprites, which at the time was seen as a bad thing. That would generally go kind of in the negative column on in a review. But those games have kind of aged better, I think. I know I got done saying in the last episode that I don't understand people who say the games don't age well. And the only point I was trying to make is that the games look the same as they did then, and I still enjoy them. But at the same time, I think that the sprite-based games, just in general, they do look a little bit better. I mean, sprite-based game artwork looks better than early polygonal 3D game artwork. I mean, to most people. So. That's the only like jewel case long box games. Just in case anybody out there doesn't really know the story, hold on, I gotta pan down here a little bit. Sorry, that was a little jerky. They started out with these. I don't know if you still call them a jewel case, but these plastic cases, which are the exact same cases used by the Sega Saturn and the Sega CD. But then sometime in either late 95 or early 96, I want to say late 95, they switched over to these cardboard cases. And then they actually used another case that, well, I'll show you in a minute. But so as we get down here, like, because these are all still 95 releases, and they're in these cardboard cases. Like here we have Destruction Derby. Awesome game. I was just playing this one the other night, actually. And then it has like this little insert glued into it for the CD to snap into. And in a way, these are better because they don't break. As anybody who collects these games knows, the hinges on these cases break really, really easily. And so here you don't have that problem anymore, but then now you have something made of cardboard. And it's nice quality and it's thick and everything, but I'm just, finding one of these in like really good condition is going to be pretty difficult. Next we have Loaded. It's a good example of a game that, in my opinion, is really fun, that seems to fly under the radar. Now, I should mention that, I'm going to talk about games that I think are cool, I think they're fun, And, I know because you guys tell me that a lot of you will go out and buy games based on the stuff that I say. And so I just want to make it clear, I do not know the current going price of like any of these games. In fact, one, because I looked up one. But other than that, so if I say a game is cool, understand that I'm not saying that it's fun as a function of its price. And so maybe a game is fun, but maybe it sells for $80 now, and based on that, maybe you shouldn't get it. So, but my point was just, I bought Loaded just a few years ago, and I got it for like $10 on eBay. And, for a long box game that's not a sports game, that's a good deal. And this is a cool game in my opinion. It's really violent though. It's bloody. It's kind of sick a little bit, but as far as some of the imagery, but it's just pretty fun. It's like this overhead shooter. Like, I don't know if you imagine something like Smash TV. But I mean, it's not game show based, but I just mean it's like overhead and you're just shooting and running in all directions. And I don't know. I just think the game's pretty fun. So then next here we've got the original Twisted Metal. This is one that I had back then, but again, this is a game that I bought greatest hits because I didn't want to have it in this type of packaging. Awesome game. I was talking about it the other night on Twitter, and I think it was my friend Derek that was saying that when he was in college and he was living in the dorms, they had this game and they were playing it multiplayer. And definitely Twisted Metal is much, much more fun to play multiplayer. I mostly played this game when my buddy Fabian would come over and we'd play together, because I would play it by myself and I would get bored pretty quickly. So more of a two-player game. Next we've got Doom, the PlayStation version of Doom, which in my opinion is a really good port or version of the game. And it was one of the very first videos I ever did for Classic Gaming Quarterly, was reviewing Doom. And that was about 4.5 years ago. So at the time, if you didn't have a computer that was good enough to run Doom, which actually I didn't. Like in 1995, I was still rocking a 386. And like I think I could play Doom, but I had to have the screen shrunk down a lot. And so to be able to buy, Doom for $50 and play it on the PlayStation is awesome. I want to say that it includes the levels from Doom 1 and 2, but it's been so long since I did that episode or really read about this particular version of the game that I don't want to say and then be wrong. Well, it says back here, there were 50 levels of madness and mayhem from Ultimate Doom and Doom 2, plus unique new levels of destruction that make all hell break loose on your screen. So it sounds like it's the all of Doom and Doom 2 plus some custom levels. So that's awesome. Oh, this is also compatible with the link cable. I forgot to talk about the link cable. So in the early days of the PlayStation, they had this port, link port on the PlayStation, and you could hook two PlayStations together. So you'd have to have two TVs and two PlayStations and two copies of a game. But then you could basically network the two PlayStations together with a link cable, and you could play two players simultaneous where each player has their own screen. And I don't really have anybody to do that with, so I haven't actually done it. I actually have a link cable, and I'm sure I have two PlayStations that have link cable ports. In later hardware revisions, they got rid of that port because nobody was really using it. So next here we got another heavy hitter, and that is the original Wipeout. I don't know, what do you say about Wipeout? What an awesome game. It's a Psygnosis game. I didn't really mention Psygnosis yet, but they were just a powerhouse in the early days of the PlayStation. I think by this time Sony had actually already bought Psygnosis, and later they got changed to Sony Studios. I'm going to say Liverpool. I'm probably wrong, but they're a British development house, and so later they got renamed from Psygnosis to Sony Studios, wherever the heck they are. And a lot of games got put out on the PlayStation under that label, like Destruction Derby is another one, and we'll get to a couple more, I guess, as we go along. Actually, the first PlayStation game I ever bought, the game that I got with my PlayStation, was, if I remember correctly, also a Psygnosis game, and we'll talk about that when we get to it. But Wipeout, futuristic racing, awesome techno soundtrack, and this one also you can use the link cable. That would have been really sweet, actually. Next we've got Road Rash. Well, so first of all, I just want to say, I said that I thought that Road Rash was like the most overrated game ever or whatever in the launch of the PlayStation episode, and I was really talking about the Genesis game, and which probably caused a lot of confusion for people just because I was doing a video talking about the PlayStation, and so people would probably naturally assume that I was talking about this version of the game, which I wasn't. This is based on the 3DO version of the game. I don't want to say if it's a port, but if you've played the 3DO version, then that's pretty much what this is. I haven't talked about this yet either, but the 3DO came out in '93. It didn't really last that long, but it had quite a few noteworthy games come out on it, and some of those ended up coming out on the PlayStation later because I guess these developers wanted to still try to make their money back or whatever, and it was another 32-bit system. I don't know. I have no idea what would go into reprogramming a game from the 3DO to the PlayStation. But this game and the next two games I'm going to show you started out their life on the 3DO. And I have the 3DO version of this game and the next game, Road and Track Presents The Need for Speed, which was a pretty sweet racing game back then. It sort of made an attempt at pseudo-realism, kind of like Gran Turismo did later. I wouldn't quite put it in the same league as that, but also a very cool game. And like I said, both 3DO games. And then the next one is Gex from Crystal Dynamics. They kind of tried to market Gex as maybe kind of like the Mario of the 3DO for a while. Like they were trying to have like an animal mascot, and that ended up being Gex. And then, as you can see, that game ended up also coming out on the PlayStation. Now, this is the 2D Gex. Later there was the Gex 3D games. This is also the first game I have that has this new. I guess this is sort of the last iteration of the long box. And here they've gone back to using plastic, so now the whole thing is plastic, and they've just glued this paper, like cardstock type stuff on here with all the artwork on it. And the problem with these is that whatever glue they used has just dried out and broken down over time, and like most of my games, it's peeling up, and it's really not that big of a deal to just glue it back down, but I just haven't ever done it because it's just not it's not that important. Like, it would be nicer to have it glued down, but I kind of have better things to do. So next we've got a couple more sports games, so I'll just go through them really fast. But Triple Play 97 is an example of this is still sprite based, and so it kind of plays more like a 16-bit game on steroids. Like a 16-bit game with way better sound, probably better graphical effects. But it's still sprite based, which I think makes it kind of cool to play now. And the same goes, I think, for, if I remember correctly, well, maybe not. No, that looks like sprites to me. NBA Live 96, which you can see I paid $1.99 for. I got this at a place called Game Surge in like Akron, Ohio, or like a suburb of Akron, Ohio, when I was there for work. That's actually how I got a lot of these games. Like I don't have that job anymore, but I used to have a job where I traveled a lot for work, and like flew to different cities and even flew to a different country or two, and a lot of times I would be going back to the same city over and over again, and I would kind of know where all the video game stores were, or all the good thrift stores were, and that was how I would kill time. Like after work, was I would go look for video games, and like I got so much stuff that way. And a lot of these long box games, if anybody is watching this who lives in like the Southwest, a lot of these long box games came from Bookman's. And in fact, I still have, there's a couple games I had over here that aren't on the shelf. Like here's Nova Storm. These are older. These are still in the original jewel case, but you can see, maybe you can see that it's got the Bookman's. I paid $6 for that at Bookman's. So places like Bookman's, like the people that work there, like they know all the marquee titles. Like you're not going to walk into a Bookman's and get a good deal on like Super Mario 64 or like any TurboGrafx game, although I do usually see them when I would go there. But other games that, like, if they've never heard of it, they just slap a cheap price on it and they just want it like out of there. And but they have at least the one I used to go to one in Phoenix and one in, I forgot what it's called, like some suburb of Phoenix. Arizona. And I used to find just a lot of stuff there because they had a huge selection of stuff that nobody wanted. Like, who really wants to go pick up a copy of Nova Storm? Especially, like, I'm talking about like 5 years ago when game collecting hadn't really gotten as crazy as it is now. And just the other game I have over here is this high octane racing game. So getting back to the shelf, the next one I've got here is Resident Evil. And I think there's a problem with this game. If I remember correctly, unless at some point I got a different copy and just don't remember, I think this one, like, the music doesn't work. So, but I mean, whatever, it's fine. Cool to have the original long box. I think I either have or I had. Yeah, I had Resident Evil Director's Cut, but I think I got rid of it just because I have this. So, yeah, but obviously an awesome game. I mean, what do you say about Resident Evil? Next here, Assault Rigs. Like, this is another game that I think is a little bit of kind of a sleeper game. It's like that, like, it's like a tank battle game, but it was just pretty fun. I picked this up at, I think, Portland Retro Gaming Expo, like either the last time or time before that I went, which admittedly was a long time ago. And part of the reason I wanted to get it, see, this would be kind of a con for some people, but what I thought was cool is anybody my age who shopped at KB back in the day will recognize the display box only sticker, and then there's a KB price tag, you know. And, you know, for a long time, if I had bought something like this, you know, I would have been trying to get the stickers off of it so that it could be like perfect. But, you know, it's like now if you get a game, like an old Genesis game that has like a rental sticker on it, it's almost like this cool historical artifact, and like I don't want to mess with it, you know, like, because it's some rental store that probably closed 10 or 15 years ago. But anyway, you can see Assault Rigs was originally $54.99 and then got marked down to $39.99, and I probably paid about $10 for it, I would guess. Next here, I don't know, I got Panzer General. I don't know, you know, it's like one of these hexagon-based, you know, military strategy games. I remember renting Allied General, which was the sequel to this, on the PlayStation. We used to go, my friend Fabian and I, we would go to this rental store. I might have told this story before, but this rental store would have a thing every Tuesday where you could rent anything in the store for $1, including video games or new release movies. And so we used to go in there and we would drop like $20 and just leave with a huge stack of games. Just because that was our way of just trying out games. And that's how we got Allied General. But I had never played Panzer General back then. It's a SSI game. So it was at Strategic Simulations and, I don't know, Incorporated, I guess. I don't really know. SSI made a lot of really cool games, like computer games, back in the 80s and 90s, like the Gold Box games, the Dungeons and Dragons games. And then here I've got NHL Face-Off. NHL Face-Off games are pretty cool. At least the first couple. I believe the first two were sprite-based. Like, this would have been effectively Face-Off 96. And then I also have Face-Off 97 in a jewel case. And then Face-Off 98 I don't have, but that one is polygon-based. This one also has Sergei Fedorov on the cover, so that alone is a reason to own it, in my opinion. But it's also a pretty fun game. Next, do I want to try to tip it even further? Yeah, why not? All right, getting towards. Oh, we missed Cyber Speed here. Cyber Speed is just this weird. It's this weird racing game where all of the racing ships are hanging on this cable, and you can shoot at each other. It's like weapons based and everything, but it's kind of a weird game, but it's kind of fun to play, I guess, once you get the hang of it. Down here, not too much really noteworthy. I've got Extreme Pinball, Thunder Strike 2, Jupiter Strike, Wing Commander 3, Heart of the Tiger. Pretty sure that was a 3DO game and obviously also a computer game. Here I've got the original NFL Game Day, which was really the only football game that you could play for the PlayStation for a while because Madden 96 got canceled. They actually finished the game, Madden 96, or, you know, came close to finishing it, and then canceled it because I guess they didn't like how it was turning out. And so at the beginning, you know, Game Day was what you had to get if you wanted to play football. So again, sprite based, and looks pretty good. I haven't played it in a long time, so I can't really say like it's good or not, but it looks pretty good. Next we've got the original Street Fighter Alpha. Street Fighter, you know, Alpha 1, I guess, Warrior's Dreams. I just really like Street Fighter games, so Whenever I see one, if I don't have it, I'll buy any Street Fighter game. Easily Street Fighter, the Street Fighter 2 series, and Street Fighter 3 and the Street Fighter Alpha series are like my favorite fighting game franchise. Probably why I don't like Mortal Kombat, because back then, of course, they were sort of direct competitors, more so than other fighting games. And then lastly here, I've got Descent. I remember playing Descent on the PC when I was in like high school, and it kind of just blew me away. And so that's kind of, I guess, why I have this. It's easier to pop this in than to get my PC all hooked up. But it was kind of it's this first-person game. I mean, it's still a first-person shooter, I guess, technically, but you're like in the cockpit of some kind of ship, and you're like flying through these tunnels and stuff. And that there was like the early days of like actual 3D or pseudo 3D, first-person shooters. Like with Wolfenstein, it was. I mean, it's not 3D; it's actually a 2D game. But I'm saying it gave the illusion of 3D, but in a way that was kind of obvious that it was kind of playing tricks. Whereas with like Doom, it looked a lot more 3D, even though actually Doom still wasn't 3D. But a game like this came out, I would guess, not too long after. Still early 90s, and so back then these 3D type games, whether it was a first-person shooter like Doom or something like this, were just sort of mind-blowing when you were used to playing 2D games. So then panning back up, and we'll come over here and start looking at the jewel case games. So these are all in alphabetical order until we get to just a little stack down here that I just haven't gotten around to putting in order. And then down here we've got like demo discs and stuff, because I used to be really into collecting demo discs. So first here I've got Ace Combat 2 and Ace Combat 3. Ace Combat 2 was the first Ace Combat game I ever got, and I don't really remember where I got it. I'm guessing I probably got it out of the used bin at GameStop or something. Because I think that when I got Ace Combat 2, I already had my PlayStation 2. I got my PlayStation 2 on launch day. But I primarily used it to play PlayStation 1 games and to watch DVDs, because in the early days of the PS2, there weren't a whole lot of good games coming out for it. So I played this, and then I really wanted to get Ace Combat 3 Electrosphere, but the game hadn't been out for very long. It says copyright 99 on here, but I'm guessing it came out in Japan in 99 and maybe didn't come out in the US until 2000, but that's completely a guess. But the game was still $50. And, as soon as I got a PlayStation 2, I was not going to pay the same price for a PS1 game as a PS2 game, which really doesn't make any sense, because like they're both going to provide you, hopefully, roughly the same amount of entertainment. So what's the difference if it's a PS1 game or a PS2 game? And I remember, I don't know if anybody watching this ever got to go, but in San Francisco, there's this complex called the Metreon that I guess was owned by Sony. Maybe it still is, I don't know. But there was a movie theater in there, and there was like a nice video arcade. But then there was a Sony style store, and there was also a Sony PlayStation store, like a Sony owned, Sony run PlayStation store. And I only got to go there a couple times, but it was like that was the first time I ever saw Guitar Hero, which would have been the last time I ever went there. I had never even heard of Guitar Hero, and people were in there playing it, and because they had all these demo kiosk type things set up. But the first time I ever went there, they had like a little display of Ace Combat 3 like up at the counter, and I wanted the game so bad because I had such a good time playing Ace Combat 2, but they wanted $50 for it, and I was just, I was in college at the time, I should mention, and so spending $50 when you're in college, that's probably like 3 weeks worth of groceries. So especially back in the early 2000s, so $50 was kind of no joke. Next, I've just got Ape Escape. I remember reading about Ape Escape in PSM when it came out. Ape Escape was, if not the first game, one of the first games that required that you had an analog controller, like a DualShock or just the analog controller. There was the analog controller. I don't remember if that's exactly what it was called, because there was also the analog joysticks that came out much earlier. But like when I got my PlayStation, it still came with the original style controller that didn't have analog sticks, which is actually the controller I prefer if I'm playing a game that isn't going to use the sticks. But later they came out with the analog controller that didn't have the vibration function, because I guess Sony didn't want to pay whoever owned the rights to having a force feedback type controller. And I actually bought that right when it came out, and I think I have 2 of them now. And I liked those because they were quite a bit bigger. And the sticks were concave, so that your thumb would kind of rest inside of it. And it's the most comfortable, I think, PlayStation controller. But shortly afterwards, they replaced it with the DualShock. And so that those controllers are actually kind of rare because they weren't on the market for that long. So like if you're ever in a thrift store and there's a bunch of controllers, like check and see if any of them, if you see any like, dual analog stick PlayStation controllers that have concave hard plastic sticks instead of the convex soft rubber, then you found a cool controller. But this was one of the first games that came out where it required you to have the dual analog sticks. And it even has a little quote on the back from PSM magazine. "We give this game our highest recommendation." And I remember that. They were all super into Ape Escape when it came out. Next here I have Blood Omen Legacy of Kain. And I first saw this game when my friend Rafe brought it over one night. Rafe introduced me to a couple of cool PlayStation games, the other one being Intelligent Cube, which is an awesome game. And he brought over Blood Omen Legacy of Kain, and I just remember thinking it was really cool. Like it's like an action RPG, but you're like a vampire, and we didn't play it for that long, so I just remember thinking it was neat because like you were like sucking people's blood, but you like weren't like a normal vampire. You're like biting somebody on the neck. But I remember with this game, like somehow you were standing like sort of at arm's length and like sucking the blood and like having like a stream of blood coming in your mouth. And I was just like, man, that looks sweet. And so I kind of wanted to pick up this game, but one of the things that's weird is like over time there are certain games that were hard to get back then, or that cost more back then, where now like they're not games that anybody cares about anymore. But Blood Omen Legacy of Kain was a game that for a while was hard to come by and wasn't that cheap. And then what happened was, I'm guessing this probably wasn't a high production run game. This is a Crystal Dynamics game. But the game that kind of brought the legacy of Kain franchise or whatever into the limelight was Soul Reaver, which came out after this. And that also came out on the Dreamcast. And what happened was, towards the end, I don't know if anybody remembers this, but like towards the very end of the PlayStation's life cycle, they started putting out these like boxed sets that had like white spine art. And so like instead of the greatest hits, that ugly lime green that I hate, it had white. And so they would put like 2 or 3 games together. Like maybe they'd have the whole Grand Theft Auto series or Crash Bandicoot. But I remember that they had the 2 Legacy of Kain games together in this box set. And as soon as that came out, like the price on this game went way down because it became more common. And so I forgot where I got this game, but I found it someplace for pretty cheap. But it's a pretty neat game, I think, to play. At least it was back then. I don't know how well it's held up, but I always thought it was pretty cool. The next one I've got here is Bravo Air Race. Bravo Air Race is a game that I was on the lookout for like a really long time. And this is a game that I ended up finally finding, I believe, at Bookman's in Phoenix. I first played this game on a demo disc back in like 97, 98. I had a buddy that worked at Software Etc. and he would slip me demo discs that they would have in the drawer or whatever that they would get from Sony or whoever. And I played this game and I thought it was really cool, but it's just not the kind of game you want to pay full price for. And it's a game that kind of, at least in my recollection, just sort of disappeared. Probably wasn't a high production run game. The best way to describe it is like Hydro Thunder, but with airplanes. And it's like a racing game, but imagine like, the Red Bull racing type of airplanes, but like you're like racing like in between buildings or in like canyons or stuff like that. And so the game is pretty fun. Kind of the only thing like a knock I would put on this game is that it's not compatible with the analog controllers, and a game like this is really better served playing it with an analog controller. It's a little bit wonky trying to play it just with the digital D-pad, but it's still a really fun game, assuming that it's not too expensive. I need to take a little sip of something. My throat's getting dry. just because somebody will ask. It's Old Speckled Hen. So next, this is a game. So this is kind of a funny story, but next game I have here is Bubsy 3D, and Bubsy 3D might be the worst game on the PlayStation. Like, maybe you could come up with something worse, like some $10 budget title or something, but Bubsy 3D is an absolutely horrible game. And that's kind of why I bought it. It's just like, it's so bad that it's almost like as a historical artifact, I want a copy of Bubsy 3D. And I got it for like $2 or $3 somewhere. And what was funny is I just remember like one day I was on Twitter and, obviously sometimes I let things that really don't need to be my business like annoy me, like the behavior of other people, like other gamers or other YouTubers. And one of the things I've mentioned before that I just don't really understand is people that feel the need to take all their games and like spread them out on the floor and take a picture just to post it on Reddit or social media or something, just because it's like, couldn't you have better spent that time doing something else? But that's kind of my point. It's just like, if that's how you enjoy your stuff, then I guess go ahead. I don't really get it, but that's fine. But somebody, I don't remember who, and even if I did, I probably wouldn't say because that's rude, but somebody took a picture of their entire Legend of Zelda collection, and it kind of came off humble braggy, like, oh, well, what do you guys think I'm still missing? And it's just like, really? And I just made some comment back about, and again, I should have just kept my mouth shut, but I just said something about like, you can actually put those video games into their respective machines and play them, like, wouldn't you rather do that? And somebody obviously took offense to that, and I just made some comment about like, not understanding people's obsession with taking pictures of their stuff and posting it online. And this is a long story, but that person's like comeback for that was to find the picture on Twitter that I took of this and posted it, because obviously I was doing it as sort of a tongue-in-cheek joke, because like I just bought the world's most horrible game. And now I'm like, bragging about it on Twitter. But I mean, it kind of showed you how clueless that person was, that they didn't understand that it was like a satirical thing, but whatever. Next here we've got Bushido Blade. And so I have a story about Bushido Blade that I'm actually pretty ashamed of. And it's always still the first thing that I think of when I see this game. And it's an awesome game. So just real quick, Bushido Blade is like this. I guess it takes place in like feudal Japan, but it's a one-on-one fighting game, like sword-based fighting game. But sort of like its hook back then was that there were no life meters, and so you could have like a coup de grace kind of blow right at the start, like where you could just like chop someone's head off. Or I don't think it actually showed someone's head being. I'm saying you could deliver a fatal one hit, like round over kind of thing, which I would think like it seemed cool back then because like, oh, they're trying to do something different. But at the same time, I feel like if you're playing a fighting game, you want the life meter, because you always want to know where do you stand versus your opponent. So, but even still, I still think this is a really cool game. But the thing about it that, like I said, I'm just sort of is a little bit shameful, is that I got my PlayStation, and then my best friend at the time, a guy named Fabian, got his PlayStation. And, we used to hang out constantly and play video games together. And his birthday was coming up, and I bought this game with the intention of giving it to him. And I had it, in my closet or whatever, just still sealed, and I was going to wrap it up and give it to him. And for whatever reason, it's like I just couldn't wait or whatever. I ended up opening it and keeping it. And, which... it's kind of like, I guess it's a victimless crime, because I'm sure I got him something else, but it was just like I bought that for him, and then I opened it. It's like I ended up giving it to myself instead, and it was just kind of like he was a really good friend, and I shouldn't have done that, or whatever. But I guess it's not that big of a deal, but it's just like 20 years later, it's still the first thing I think of when I see my copy of Bushido Blade. Next year, I've got the 2 Castlevania games. I have Symphony of the Night and Castlevania Chronicles. So we'll talk about Symphony of the Night first. So this is going to sound pretty weird, but people get into their little sort of fanboy ways. And Symphony of the Night came out in '97, which is the year that I got my PlayStation. And you know, I was a huge Final Fantasy VII fanboy. Like, that game was like a game changer for me. I got that game and I got like so into video games off of that. You know, like I got a PlayStation and I was kind of screwing around playing a few games, and then I got Final Fantasy VII, and it just like really sucked me in. Like, people can say whatever they want about that game is overhyped or whatever, or people have rose-colored glasses, or I know people that are like really hardcore Final Fantasy fans back then were disappointed by it, but it was the game that got me into role-playing games, and I think it was kind of the game that turned me into more of a hardcore PlayStation gamer. And one of the very early issues of PSM magazine, they did a feature that was called like the top 25 PlayStation games of all time. And I'm just sitting there reading it. Just for some reason, I'm just like under the assumption, well, of course, Final Fantasy VII will be the #1 game. And then I turn the page and it says #2, Final Fantasy VII. And I was just like, what? Like, I was upset. Like, not, you know, but I was annoyed, I guess. And what's the #1 game? Castlevania Symphony of the Night. And it just, because I was, you know, just a younger guy and just sort of, you know, being a fanboy, it like made me have a grudge against this game, because it's like, how dare you try to say that you're as good as Final Fantasy VII, having never played the game. And then I think the game finally went on like greatest hits, and it was $20. And by then I was already getting to where I didn't like greatest hits copies of games, because I didn't like that lime green or neon green, you know, just I wanted all my games to look the same or whatever. And I had to look around for a while, and I finally found a used copy of Symphony of the Night. And it was spring break of like 2001? Yeah, it was spring break 2001. So actually by then it had probably been on greatest hits. I'm not positive. All I know is that's when I finally bought the game. And I had gone home, you know, to visit my mom or whatever, and stay there the whole spring break. And I literally sat on the couch and played this game nonstop until I finished it, because that's how good this game is. And I would just playing it, like, part of me was like, I felt stupid for letting that stupid fanboy crap get to me. But part of it was just like, thank God that I finally like got over it and got this game, because like, wow. So I know this game is really expensive, probably. I'm guessing it's probably a $100 game. And then the other one here, Castlevania Chronicles. So this is kind of another example. Like, this game came out, what does it say on the back here? It says 2001. That sounds about right. So I'll assume it also came out here in 2001. If not, it was like early 2002. So Castlevania Chronicles was, this is originally a Sharp X68000 game that was not released in the West, because of the X68000, I don't think. Certainly wasn't here. I don't know if it came out in Europe. I don't think so. And this game was on the X68000, and it was just called like Akumajo Dracula. And it's kind of a remake of the first game in kind of the same way that like Super Castlevania 4 was, at least in Japan, was sort of sold as being a remake, but it kind of really isn't. Like, if you play it, there's not a whole lot about Super Castlevania that reminds me of the original Castlevania. So this is supposed to sort of be a remake of the original Castlevania, or maybe like sort of a retelling. Like, if you played this game, like the first level of this game is like the first level of the NES game, but after that, you'll see like parts of levels that are reminiscent of the NES games, but others that are completely different. And I'd say most of them are completely different. But anyway, this game came out in 2001, and it was after I had played Symphony of the Night that I saw this, and I wanted to get it, but and this game, someone correct me if I'm wrong, I believe when this game came out it was $29.99. And I kind of wanted to get it, but it was like the same thing. It's like, well, do I want to spend $30 on a PlayStation game? Maybe I'll get it later. And like I even remember going into a GameStop, in fact the same GameStop where I got Air Combat. Like, when I was going to college, the college town where I went to college didn't have a video game store. And so, even though it was full of college kids, and so if you wanted to go to a GameStop, you had to drive to the next town over. So my roommate and I used to go over there to buy video games. And they had like a display of this game on the counter. like a cardboard little thing that had a bunch of copies of this. And I remember looking at it and thinking, man, I should really pick that up. But, maybe I didn't want to spend the $30 right then, or it was the kind of thing where it's like, well, I'll just get it later. And then, it disappeared from the stores because it probably didn't have a huge print run, just, by virtue of the fact of it coming out in 2001. And so I never got it. And the price started going up. And I got pretty lucky that I got this game. I bought this game off of the forums from some guy, and I'm pretty sure I paid $30 for it. So, I basically paid the same amount I would have paid if I'd bought it new. But, I said there was one game, I looked up the price, and it was this one. I was curious. This seems like now you're going to pay like an average of like 70. It seemed like the low end was 65, high end was 85 for this game. And like in my opinion, I don't really think this game is worth it, just because a lot of it is similar to the old game. And, I don't know what Symphony of the Night sells for, but even if it was 100 or 110, you'd be better off spending that money on that than this. Although I wouldn't buy that game for $100 either, but I mean, that's just me. But this game is not, in my opinion, worth what it's selling for anymore, unless you're like a really hardcore Castlevania collector. But it is a really cool game. Next we have Chrono Cross, sequel to Chrono Trigger. I've owned this game for many, many, many years, and I have yet to play it. I think I mentioned before that sometimes I look at my RPG collection as like my retirement plans. Although I have actually gotten rid of a lot of my RPGs just because I think I'm coming to the realization that I'm just never going to get to play them. But some of them I keep. I don't think I would get rid of this one just because I really do want to play it when I get a chance. The next game, so this is the game that I got when I got my PlayStation. I don't want to tell the story because we'll talk about that in a flashback of getting my PlayStation. But I ended up getting this game, codenamed Tanka, which is just sort of this, very forgettable first-person shooter, published by Psygnosis. I don't know for sure if they developed it or not. I don't see anybody else's name on the back of this, though. But, at the time, I just thought, that the graphics looked pretty sweet. I don't think I really saw any games that I really wanted to have when I bought my PlayStation. So I couldn't really tell you what my motivation was for buying a PlayStation like the day that I bought it. But, of course, the PlayStation came with a demo disc that I'll show later. And just because, like, you can't just not buy a game, I ended up getting this one. And I will say that when we stuck it in, because Fabian was with me when we got it, when we stuck it in, we were pretty blown away by it. Like, like the graphics, like, wow, look at those lens flares, But it was pretty forgettable. I'm sure I probably, I based my purchase on, it's got some pretty cool screenshots on the back. And then it's got, a couple of quotes. GamePro said, "This one kicks butt." And Next Generation magazine said, "Redefining the state of console shooters as we know them." So, like, how can you not get that? Because, of course, at that time, like, I had played Doom in the little shrunk down screen on my computer, and I loved Wolfenstein. And so first-person shooter was the kind of thing I was going to be interested in. The next three games here, this is just the Colony Wars trilogy for the PlayStation. I think these games are really cool. They remind me of X-Wing for the computer. So I think that they're really neat games. I haven't played through all of them, but I would very much like to. Next we have the Crash Bandicoot trilogy. This was another one, like I said, this one came out in that little 3-pack. Goodness. I stepped on a cord. That wasn't... but I think if you got like a greatest hits version of this, you didn't get these cool, I don't know if you can see it on camera, but it's like, it's not a hologram. It's got that plastic in it that's like a zipper. If you put your fingernail across it and the stuff moves, I just think that's cool. But, the Crash games are awesome. Sort of, I mean, it's 3D graphics, I guess, but it's like, you're like on rails. So it's not like a free roaming world. At least the first one's not. The third one might be. But they're just cool games anyway. So next I've got Diablo. I got this in a trade with somebody. This is another game that I kind of don't know why I hang on to it, and I might end up getting rid of it. I actually never played Diablo on the computer, because by the time, I told you I had that 386 and it was obsolete by like 94 really. And then by the time I started getting back into PC gaming, it was like 2001. So like, Diablo probably came out in like, I don't know, 96, I think. the PC version, I mean, and so it just, like, I missed the boat on that because it came out in a window of time when I wasn't playing PC games. Next, I've got Dragon Warrior 7. I love all the Dragon Warrior games. Einhander, the Squaresoft shooter. And then I have all of the Final Fantasy releases for the PlayStation. So I got Anthology, Origins, Chronicles, Tactics, and then just 7, 8, 9. And somebody asked in the comment section of the Q&A video that I just posted, I've made comments before about Final Fantasy 8 being a pretty big disappointment for me because I ran out and got this game as soon as it came out, Final Fantasy 8, just based on how much I loved Final Fantasy 7. And I didn't really like it, but I got Final Fantasy 9. It like didn't make me not want to play Final Fantasy games anymore, although I may have waited and read a review. But I got Final Fantasy 9 pretty much right when it came out. Actually, my wife bought this for me when it came out. She was still my girlfriend at the time. But when I got my PlayStation 2, I would say I spent more time playing this on it than playing any PlayStation 2 games for probably the first 6 months that I had it. Here I've got Gran Turismo and Gran Turismo 2. I don't know if I told my story about Gran Turismo that somebody gave me a burned copy of this like weird Japanese racing game like sometime in like maybe 97. I don't remember when this came out in Japan, but it was just one of the 2 discs, and I took it over to my buddy's house because he had a chipped PlayStation and put it in, and I remember him just saying how much it sucked. Like, you can't even control the cars, because he was probably used to arcade style controls. And so he was like, oh, this game is terrible, and then of course, it turned out to be Gran Turismo. So Harvest Moon Back to Nature. I flunked multivariable calculus in college because of this game, because I couldn't stop playing it long enough to study for my final. So I just got an F. And I don't know what was wrong with me when I was in college sometimes, but this was the first Harvest Moon game that I ever played. I bought this game because there was some like freebie video game magazine for a while called Silicon, maybe, that you go into like video game stores and they would just have them there for free. And they had an article about this game and it sounded cool. And I picked it up cheap, maybe it was like $20 or something. And I'd never heard of Harvest Moon just because I didn't have a Super Nintendo or Nintendo 64. So like when I first got this game, I didn't realize that it wasn't like the first game in the series, and just had a lot of fun with it. So it's a cool game, but there's part of me now that if I fire this game up, it reminds me of failing calculus. So Hot Shots Golf, I got this one as soon as it came out. PSM was really big into this game before it even came out here. Like PSM used to have their section of the magazine that was all about import games. Like games that hadn't come out here yet, and like this game is called I'm probably not saying it right, but Minano Golf in Japan, and like they would have these like lists of like most wanted games of games they wanted to get brought over to the U.S., and Minano Golf was always at the top of the list. And so when it finally got announced that it was coming out here, they're like, oh, and so I got it as soon as it came out, and just what a great game. Even if you're not into golf really, like Hot Shots Golf is just an awesome game. I got the PSP game when that came out and played a lot of it on that. And then when I got a Vita when I was still at my old job when I was traveling a lot, and mostly used it to play the version of Hot Shots Golf for the Vita, like while I was sitting on airplanes or whatever. I mentioned this game a little while ago, Intelligent Cube. Unfortunately, I think this is a game that's probably pricey now. I think this was maybe just it was a low print run. I really don't know. This was the other game that I remember my friend Rafe bringing over one night along with Blood Omen and showing it to me. And I just thought it was so cool. It's like this action puzzle type of game. I mean, it's very unique. And when he showed it to me, I was like, man, I got to get a copy of that, But I think even then, because this would have been like 99 or 2000 when I saw it. It's a 97 game, but I didn't play it until like 99 or like early 2000. And so by then, like eBay already existed, and I had an eBay account. I think I've had an eBay account since like 99 or something. Like I might be off by a year, but even then, like this game I think was like $50 used, And I was like, oh, I'm not paying that. And then I got really lucky and I found a copy of this for $5 at a Blockbuster Video. And then later I found another copy of it, which is this copy, at a flea market for probably $5 again. So a cheaper way to play this game, at least, well, I shouldn't say that because I'm not sure, but it was released on, I don't know if I still have my copy, it was released on the PSP. Oh yeah, here it is. I think only in Japan though, but the PSP is region free, IQ Mania. And I picked this up, I think, at Fry's Electronics because they used to carry import PSP games for some reason. And, this is Intelligent Cube, and I think it's got even more levels on it and stuff. I mean, all the text on here is in Japanese, so I don't remember, all the differences or whatever between the two. But I can't imagine that this is not way cheaper than trying to get yourself a copy of this. Next, Jetmoto. Jetmoto's all right. This was sort of one of the big names for the PlayStation back then. It's, it's pretty fun. It's sort of like I don't know, a cross between like motorcycle racing and jet ski racing. Like sometimes you're on the water, sometimes you're not. I remember this being one of the first games I ever saw that had in-game advertising because it has advertisements for Mountain Dew. I'm sure you won't be able to make that out, but like this guy's got like a Mountain Dew racing suit on. MLB Pennant Race was like an early, I think it was the only baseball game I had for the PlayStation back when it was current. I just thought it was cool. Like it has like play-by-play announcer, like a play-by-play commentator. And I remember thinking that was pretty cool. But it's not a bad game. Medal of Honor. This is the first game I ever bought on eBay. It would have been in like probably 2000 or maybe like late 99. I mean, I think the game came out in 99. And it was just like, well, I don't really want to buy the game brand new. And I was like, well, maybe I'll just keep an eye out on eBay for somebody who's like, bought it and finished it and is trying to get some of their money back. And so I ended up getting this game quite a bit cheaper. And I remember having fun playing it. I remember I spent like a Saturday playing this. Like I was working in like the chemistry department of the community college where I was a student at the time. And some student needed to come in and make up some lab work, and so they asked me if I would come in and open up the lab for her and then just sit there with her for safety reasons while she did her experiment. And she was a friend of mine, so it was like not a big deal. And I remember like I didn't have anything else to do, so I brought my PlayStation and hooked it up to like a TV that was like mounted up in the corner of the room. And I remember playing this, and I remember her just being like kind of horrified by it because it was, violent, although by today's standards it's really not. Next 4 games are all I believe it's the only 4 two-dimensional Mega Man games for the PlayStation. I got X4 not long after it came out, I guess. Like I probably had this game in 97 or 98. I think it was another game I probably picked up for like $20, $30, like at a KB toy store. And then I've got X5, X6, and then Mega Man 8. This is the Mega Man 8 Collector's Edition. Like I've had both versions. I think the only difference is this comes with like a little extra booklet. But those are certainly cool games. I already talked about in the last episode as part of the Q&A, I talked about Metal Gear Solid and VR missions, so I'm not really going to go over that again. Next we have Nectaris Military Madness. Now, I didn't actually know that this game existed. For anybody who knows or has a TurboGrafx 16 or knows about it, like Military Madness is one of the best games on the TurboGrafx, and you should definitely go find it. But it was actually a whole series of games. It was just that was the only one, as far as I know, that came out here. There's also a Super Famicom game, but I don't think it came out here. And I was not aware that they ever made a PlayStation installment in the series until, once again, I was traveling for work at my old job, and I was in Burbank, California, and I went into a video game store, and they had this on the shelf, and it was pretty cheap. And like I said, I didn't even know it existed, so I got pretty excited, and so, of course, I grabbed it. So if you like Military Madness on the TurboGrafx, no reason not to pick that one up. Next, I've just got Need for Speed 2, 3, and then High Stakes. Nothing really exciting to talk about there. Face Off 97. Another Red Wing on the cover. This time it's Paul Coffey. Like I said, cool game, sprite based still. It's pretty fun. I was always more into the EA games. I don't have 97. Where is 97? Where's NHL 97? I think I put. Oh, it's down here. For some reason I put all my 97 games somewhere else. But well, I got to talk about them together though, right? So NHL 97 was, I believe, the second PlayStation game I ever bought. So basically, what happened was, you know, I haven't really talked about this. We'll probably go into it in more detail on Flashback. But I went through this period for a couple of years where I really just wasn't playing video games. And oddly, what got me back into video games initially was watching Kevin Smith movies like Mallrats and Chasing Amy, just because I think one of them, I think Mallrats had a Sega Saturn in it, and then Chasing Amy had a Sega Genesis in it, and they were playing hockey games. Like I think in Mallrats, I think it was NHL All-Star Hockey for the Saturn. You know, when they wake up, you know, Jason Lee has Shannon Doherty in the bed with him, and he wakes up and she wants him to go make her breakfast or whatever, or, you know, meet his mom, and he wants to unpause his game, you know, and keep playing or whatever, and that's why they break up, right? And then in Chasing Amy, I don't, you know, it was just a thing of him playing some NHL game on a Genesis, and for some reason I just thought it looked like fun. Like I was not a hockey fan. I didn't play hockey games. I didn't know anything about hockey really. But those games just looked like fun, just from the little bit of watching them play it. And then, of course, there was the scene in Swingers where they're playing NHL 92? 93. NHL PA Hockey 93, right, when they make the head bleed, you know. And so just on a whim, because I still had my Genesis, even though I hadn't played it in a while, this would have been in like early 97, I went to KB Toys and just figured, well, I'm just going to buy whatever the latest NHL game is. And that was NHL 97 for the Genesis. And I came home and I wanted to start playing that, and it's like I didn't even really know. I could probably name you like a couple of NHL teams, like the Los Angeles Kings and the New York Rangers, and I didn't really, but then also the Detroit Red Wings. And I knew the Detroit Red Wings from watching Home Improvement and loving Home Improvement, and of course, you know, it takes place in like suburban Detroit, and so he's a big Red Wings fan. And for that reason alone, I would always be the Red Wings when I was playing this game. And eventually I got the PlayStation, like I said, and then I figured, well, why don't I just get NHL 97 for that instead? And this was back when you could still return video games that you'd opened brand new. And so I took NHL 97 for the Genesis and put it back in the packaging, and I took it back to KB. And I'm guessing I probably just exchanged it for NHL 97 for the PlayStation. You see it's got John Van Beesbrook there, who was the goalie of the Panthers, who lost the Stanley Cup in '96. So, like, somebody asked me a while back, like, why I'm a Detroit Red Wings fan when I'm not from there, and it's simply because I was playing as them all the time in first the Genesis game and then this game. So, like, I already knew all the players' names and everything, and then I decided I was going to start watching hockey, and so I just started watching the Red Wings because they were the only team, like, whose roster I was familiar with. And I've just been like a Red Wings fan ever since. Maybe that's a lame reason to be a fan of a particular team, but you know, whatever. So based on the fact that I like this game is actually not very good at all. In fact, if Madden 96 was anything like this, I can understand why it didn't get released. As soon as it came out, I bought NHL 98, which is worlds better than 97. And I probably spent more time playing this game than any other game on the PlayStation for as long as I had it, I would guess. I just love it. And then, of course, when NHL 99 came out, that's Peter Forsberg from the Avalanche, who, of course, I hate, and then Eric Lindros from the Flyers, who was an awesome, awesome player who his career basically got cut short because he kept getting concussions, and that was back before people really understood the gravity of getting concussions in sports. So I don't know whatever came of Eric Lindros, but hopefully he's okay, because he got his bell rung really one too many times for his own health. And then the only other hockey game I've got here is NHL Rock the Rink, which is kind of reminiscent of like Mutant League hockey. They're not literally mutants or monsters, although they look kind of monster-like, but extremely arcadey game, and I think it's pretty fun. Like the two arcade-style hockey games I can think of on the PlayStation off the top of my head are the 2-on-2 Open Ice Challenge and Rock the Rink, and I personally prefer Rock the Rink. Next, I forgot, there was a third game. So Oddworld Abe's Odyssey. Rafe brought this game over to my house at the same time. So he had this and Blood Omen and Intelligent Cube. And I just remember thinking it was a cool game. It's a 2D. There's not a whole lot of 2D games really on the PlayStation, right? Like 2D side-scrolling games, because they sort of de-emphasized that. But that's what this is. Sort of, if I remember correctly, it's like similar controls again to Prince of Persia, like in the last episode I was talking about Blackthorn. But definitely a neat game. And, it started the franchise, right? There was Abe's Odyssey, and then Abe's Exodus, and then there was an Oddworld game on the Xbox. And that might have been the end. Next, we've got probably one of the last great thrift store finds I ever had. That is Ogre Battle. And sort of the short story behind this was I found this game at my local thrift store the same thrift store where I found these 3DO games. And it was just the game and the manual. So it's got, even though it's in this 2-disc thing, it only is a 1-disc game. And then it had the manual that unfortunately has a ring, or somebody used it as a coaster, but that's okay. And I got it for 50 cents. So I went on eBay and found somebody that was selling just the case. Like, it was the case with the front insert and the back insert. And it was kind of expensive. I think it was like maybe upwards of $20. But I just kind of looked at it as like the totality. Like, if I'm getting a complete in the box copy of Ogre Battle for $20, then I'm doing pretty good. So I used to have Ogre Tactics back in the day, but I don't have that one anymore. Next we have Parappa the Rapper. This was another game that I remember the editors at PSM kind of going crazy over. Rightfully so. Awesome game. In fact, I remember the month they reviewed it on sort of the masthead page where they had all their pictures. They were all wearing, I guess Sony gave out these beanies to them, like the orange beanie with the little frog on it. And they were all wearing those, and people were writing them letters like, where can I get one of those? And they're like, well, I don't, because now they'd probably sell them, because that was probably a missed opportunity. But it's definitely a cool game. This was another game that I think for a while went through a period where it was a little bit pricey. I'm not sure what its deal is now, but this is another game. I got this one at Blockbuster, kind of towards the end of Blockbuster's run, at least around here, when they were sort of just getting rid of everything. Next, I've got Peter Jacobson's Golden Tee Golf. If anybody's ever played a Golden Tee Golf game, in the arcade, like, this is a popular game. Maybe not anymore, but it was a popular game to find like in a bar. Just a second. In a bar, it had like a trackball. So like to hit the ball, you'd pull the trackball back, and then you would like spin it forward. And so that was sort of where the technique came in, is because if you didn't spin it exactly back and exactly forward, you would hook or slice or whatever. And obviously there's not a trackball controller for the PlayStation, at least not that I know of. But the way this one gets around it, you can use, I think, the normal 3-click system with this. It's some kind of just click, it might not be 3-click, but the fun way to play this game is you use an analog controller, and then you use one stick to pull back and the other stick to push forward, just like you would have with the trackball, to sort of mimic that. And I think it actually works really well. And this game's a lot of fun. I didn't know that this game had come out on the PlayStation until I found it at a store. And it was next to nothing because it's a sports game. And I brought it home and fired it up and was like, well, this is really cool. So that's why I hung on to it. Next, Project Overkill. Kind of, I don't know, whatever. It kind of reminds me a little bit of Loaded, but it's like a 3/4 view or whatever. It's okay, I guess. The next game is more fun to talk about. Rampage World Tour. Rampage was just an awesome arcade game when I was a kid. I remember I lived not too far away from a Straw Hat Pizza. I don't know if that even exists anymore. And they had the original Rampage, and I used to love playing that game. And then later, Midway released this Rampage World Tour game. into the arcades, where it's still 2D, but like the graphics are 3D, I guess, or they look 3D. I assume they're 3D. Whatever they look really cool. The game still plays basically the same, but that's a good thing. Like, they didn't mess with the formula too much. And this is a really, really cool game. I have no idea. Once again, I don't know if this is a game you can pick up cheap or not. But if you can, you definitely should. This next one is another game that I kind of was looking out for like just years and years. It's another game that I think I read about in PSM and thought it would be cool to get, and that is RC de Go. And it's just, like it probably sounds like RC. It's an RC game, a remote control car game. And I think that I probably wanted it based on how much I loved RC Pro-Am on the NES when I was a kid. And so I was looking for this game forever, but you just couldn't find it anywhere. Like, I would never see it for sale anywhere. And once again, I found it at Bookman's. And, it's another one of these games. Like, how many of you out there really have heard of RC de Go? It's just not a game that anybody goes into the store looking for. And so I scored it at Bookman's for $5. So can't ask for much more than that. Next, I've got Rage Racer, which is just one of the Ridge Racer games. Rallycross, I bought this just because the demo disc that came with my PlayStation had a demo of Rallycross on it, and Fabian and I used to play the crap out of this game. And so I found this game at a store much later for very cheap, and so I bought it. It's really not that great of a game. It's not bad, but I mean, if you're going to play a rally game, you're going to play Sega Rally, not this. Next, Resident Evil 2, Resident Evil 3. I mean, what are you going to say about the Resident Evil games, really? Then I've got Ridge Racer Revolution, Ridge Racer Type 4. I remember this game being out at around the same time as Gran Turismo 2, which I got as soon as it came out. And so for that reason, I didn't get this game. But I always kind of would look at it on the shelf, and I kind of wanted it because it was sold alongside a special driving controller that looked cool that I probably would have hated. Namco had the NEGCON controller that was sort of split, where you would twist the whole control. Like, as far as I'm concerned, that's like the official Wipeout controller, even though they weren't made by the same company. That's like the best way to play Wipeout. And it had like analog buttons. Like, you actually, like, the buttons probably had like a ½ inch of travel, and the more you pushed it down, the more gas you gave it. That game that controller was compatible with many, many racing games, but I always used it for the Wipeout series. But then when this game came out, it even says on the back here, like, among the things it's compatible with, special controller, and then gives the part number, and then a different special controller, and it gives the part number. And so I'm guessing one of those is the NEGCON, and the other one was this controller where in the middle where the thumbsticks would normally be, it had a wheel, and it had an indentation for your thumb so that you could kind of like drive. And looking back on it now, I'm glad I didn't get it, because I don't think I would have liked it. But at the time, it was like tempting, because I really liked Gran Turismo. Next, Saga Frontier 2 from Squaresoft. That's just another RPG that's just sort of in my retirement plan. This is a cool game, Silent Bomber. Another game I found at that same thrift store, although this one I found probably 12 or 13 years ago. I've been going to the thrift store for a long time, and I had never heard of this game. It was published by Bondi. I'm not sure who made it, but like I said, I'd never heard of it. It was only until, this was before smartphones, of course, and it wasn't until I got home and looked it up that it was like, oh, it's actually a pretty uncommon game. But it's a pretty fun game. I actually haven't played this game in a really long time, because I really kind of played the crap out of it when I got it, and I haven't really played it since. But I just hang on to it because I think it's a cool game. But I don't know how much this game goes for now. But I don't know. It's kind of thing. If you've never heard of Silent Bomber, watch like a YouTube playthrough of it or something and see if you think it looks cool. I remember thinking it was really neat. Silent Hill. I got Silent Hill. Reasonably close to when it came out, I guess. And for some reason, my biggest memory of Silent Hill is hanging out at my house playing it on kind of a cloudy day. The whole thing with this game is there's like this mist everywhere that really, I think, was just to cover up all the draw-in that it otherwise would have had. But it also kind of made it spooky. And I just remember it was like this overcast day in the fall, and I was playing this game for a while, and then my buddies came over and picked me up, and we all went to the fair and watched Weird Al Yankovic in concert. It was like one of those cool days, I guess, that, sticks out in my mind even now. And so the first thing I think of with Silent Hill is watching Weird Al Yankovic and getting corn dogs. Cool game, though. I mean, just everybody's heard of Silent Hill, right? I mean, it's survival horror. It's like Resident Evil type of stuff. Next, Spyro the Dragon, or is it I've always said Spyro, but then I hear people saying Spyro. I don't know which it is. I don't really care. Kind of a kiddie game, so I'm not super into it. I just remember, this was one of those games that the editors at PSM were really hyping up, and this is another game that I've probably picked up sort of in recent years with the intention of checking it out sometime. Next is Street Fighter Collection 2. I do not have Street Fighter Collection 1 because I don't need it. Street Fighter Collection 2 has the original World Warrior, and it has my personal favorite game in the series, Street Fighter 2 Champion Edition. And if you play your games via RGB, whether you have an RGB monitor or you use a FrameMeister, really this is the best home version, the most arcade perfect home version of Champion Edition, because this game will still display in 240p. And if you get like the PlayStation 2 versions, then it's in 480i, which, really you're splitting hairs. Like, it's not really that big of a deal, but it's like if you want the most arcade perfect version, this is it. So this is like my go-to version of Street Fighter 2 Champion Edition if I want to play the game. Next, Super Puzzle Fighter 2 Turbo. This was the first and is still to this day, if I remember correctly, the only arcade game that I ever beat on 1 credit. And the university campus where I went to school used to have a pretty nice arcade down where the bowling alley is. They took the arcade out, unfortunately, and they actually were selling all of the arcade cabinets, and they still had the Puzzle Fighter cabinet, and I kind of wanted to get it, but it was just really big. I forgot. I think they're called Dynamo cabs. If anybody out there is an arcade person, this was a Dynamo cab, which is a pretty big arcade cabinet. That was before I had an arcade machine. Like now I have my Astro City, so I don't want one anyway. But I even just wanted it for the board. Like I would have just bought it and taken the board and then just sold the empty cabinet. But I just didn't want to deal with the hassle. But just based on how much I like that game, I bought the PlayStation version, which is a very good version. I'm not saying it's arcade perfect because I haven't sat there and like compared, but seems pretty arcade perfect to me. If you don't know what it's like a falling gem type of game, and it'd be a lot easier if you just look up a gameplay video than have me try to explain it to you. But it was just like one day I had like 10 minutes to kill before class, and so I just went and popped a quarter into this machine, thinking that my game would be over before too long. But I just went on a really good run and just kept winning, and I ended up ditching class because I wanted to, I was going to play until I got game over, and I ended up beating the entire game. So I thought that was pretty cool, even though I ended up ditching class because of it. Next, Siphon Filter. I was really into this game when it came out. Got this one. It's like this third person, like sort of tactical style shooter. I guess maybe you could kind of say this is maybe what I would have wanted Metal Gear to be, because this doesn't have like all the really annoying cutscenes and stuff. Like this of course has a plot, but I just didn't really pay that much attention to it. Probably the most fun part of this game for me was that you had this taser, and you could like tase guys, but if you just kept tasing them, they would start smoking and they would kill them. And for some reason, I used to get a huge kick out of that. I'm sure that this game probably for most people has not aged well. I think I would still really enjoy playing it now, but really loved it back then. Getting down to the nitty gritty here. Tecmo's Deception. I have not played. I don't even know where I got Tecmo's Deception. I need to check that one out. Tenchu Stealth Assassins. I got this one when it came out. Fabian and I used to play this game together, and man, this game was so much fun. Like the whole point of the game was, you're a ninja. Once again, it seems like it was like feudal Japan, and you could with this game you could go in guns blazing and kill all the enemies and not be sneaky, but it would give you points for like undetected kills. But the whole point of the game was to like sneak up on people and kill them. And like, I mean, I guess you could like not kill people that you didn't need to kill, but you got points for killing people sneakily. So it kind of incentivized you to kill everybody, but to do it without getting caught. But and it's like a third person, same perspective as Siphon Filter, but you had all kind of like you had a grappling hook and like throwing stars, poison rice, stuff like that. Really cool game. And then there was a Tenchu 2 as well, but I think I might have rented Tenchu 2, but didn't like it. I don't really remember. I just remember really liking the first Tenchu game. Next, of course, the iconic Tony Hawk's Pro Skater. So what I used to always do is when a game came out that I wanted, but I didn't want to pay full price for it, I would read the ads every Sunday, because back then, if new games went on Greatest Hits, they would get advertised like in the Target ad or the Best Buy ad. And if it was a game I wanted, what I would do is I would rush to the store that day, because generally there would be copies of the game that didn't have the Greatest Hits packaging, that were just leftovers. And so I would dig through and I would find one that didn't have that lime green crap and grab it, because it was still $20. And so like that's how I got Tony Hawk's Pro Skater. And like I remember, obviously I love this game, but I remember the very first time I ever saw a Sega Dreamcast. Somebody brought it over to my friend's house, and kind of like in much the same way when I was talking about Final Fantasy VII a while ago, I was really a PlayStation fanboy back then. And even though I had a Genesis before that, and so of course I saw the Dreamcast, I was like, I don't want anything to do with that thing. I'm a PlayStation guy or whatever. But I think part of that was because I knew the Dreamcast was better, as far as like it had better graphics for sure, and the guy had Tony Hawk's Pro Skater, and it's the exact same game, right? Or maybe it's the same game with better graphics. Maybe it has other enhancements, but I remember seeing that and just thinking like, wow, like that looks really good, but like I wouldn't admit it out loud. Next, Vagrant Story, just another SquareSoft published RPG that I'll play when I'm 70. Then here I've got just Wipeout XL and Wipeout 3. I think Wipeout XL is probably my favorite game in the series, but assuming that they're cheap, you should really have all three Wipeout games. I mean, they're like, in my opinion, these are like must-play games on the PlayStation. Then we just go through, I have all my, I separated out all of my 1997 sports games because I thought I had all of them and I thought that would be neat, but it turns out I'm missing NBA Live 97. But it's just PGA Tour 97, good game. Already showed you NHL 97. Here is Madden 97, which is pretty good. FIFA Soccer 97, I actually bought that one back in 97. And then Andretti Racing, which I did not buy back then, but I remember renting. Next is Tobal number 1. And in Japan, there's a Tobal number 2, but I believe that never came out here. And, it's a 3D fighting game, and it's a perfectly good game. But the noteworthy thing about this, if you can read it, is it says Final Fantasy VII sampler CD included, which, if I remember correctly, it is a playable Final Fantasy VII demo that I think you can do like the whole first section of the game, where you go to the Mako reactor and blow it up and everything. But probably a lot of copies of Tobal number 1 were sold so that people could get their hands on this Final Fantasy VII demo disc. Lastly here I have, well, these are already out of order, I guess, but I got Tomb Raider 2. Obviously Tomb Raider was a big part of the PlayStation in, I don't know, when did the first Tomb Raider come out? 96 it says. I mean, everybody knows Tomb Raider. I'm not telling anybody anything they don't know if I start talking about that, but I mean, obviously awesome game. And then here I've just got, these are like a few games that I sort of am kind of on the fence if I'm keeping them or not. I've got X-Files, which is just sort of a point-and-click style graphical adventure. 4 discs, which is a lot. But I don't think the game's that long. but it's just because it's got so much FMV footage, I guess, that it takes up 4 discs. Lemmings and oh no, more Lemmings. Everybody likes Lemmings, right? Lemmings, I think, did it get its start on the Amiga, or was it just really popular on the Amiga? I don't remember. This was like a Psygnosis game that I think like I want to say that they came out with Lemmings before Sony bought them. And so this is basically just Lemmings and then the sequel to Lemmings. There was also a 3D Lemmings released on the PlayStation that was a long box game, but it doesn't look that good. And then I just have 3 F1 games here. These are all Psygnosis games. The first one, Formula 1, then its follow-up, Formula 1 Championship Edition, and then Formula 1 99. Down here, just because I didn't know where else to put it, pan down here a little bit. Gotta go that way, right? Here? Where are we looking here? Here. I'm sorry. All right. Here I've just got Lunar and Lunar 2. They're both complete in the box, I guess. I got those on Craigslist probably like 2005. Like some guy was selling. He had 2 separate posts on Craigslist selling his Dreamcast with a bunch of games and his PlayStation with a bunch of games. And I think he wanted $40 for the PlayStation, $80 for the Dreamcast. And I just went and took them both. And I basically had 2 paper shopping bags just full of stuff. And I don't remember exactly what Dreamcast games I got, although there were good ones, but the guy must have been really into RPGs because he had so many RPGs for the PlayStation. Like there was a copy of every single Final Fantasy game in there, and then Lunar and Lunar 2, and I don't remember what else, but I just remember I already had all the Final Fantasy games. So, I mean, I ended up just selling them, and I think that alone paid for everything else, so I guess that was cool. Down here I've got some of these Jam Pack discs that I used to pick these up. I don't know if you guys remember these. Like, you know, it was just a demo disc that you could buy at retail for $4.99. And so I used to just love demo discs back then because it just gave you a chance to check out games just real quick. And so I used to always grab. Like I think that's the first Jam Pack ever, and that's the second one ever. Not really much use, I guess, in playing them now, but you know, back then when I got my PlayStation, I was so into that demo disc, and so it just kind of turned me on to demo discs, I guess. And then I just have a bunch of these PlayStation Underground discs, which was like something that you would subscribe to in the mail. I never subscribed to it. I've just picked these up over the years, like either trading with people or finding them. Some of these I've even found in thrift stores. Then we get to a bunch of these cardboard sleeve demo discs, and here in these paper sleeves, these are just official PlayStation Magazine demo discs, so I'm not going to bother going through those. But some of these paper sleeve, or some of these other cardboard sleeve demo discs are pretty cool. This is the one I showed on the PlayStation launch episode. I actually had to buy this on eBay for that episode. This is the demo disc that came. I'm going to put this back up because this is a weird angle. This is the demo disc that came with the PlayStation if you bought it at launch. Was this PlayStation Pix. And then I think shortly afterwards it was replaced with a green one that maybe had slightly different games on it. And like here on the back they've got Mortal Kombat 3, Madden 96, which of course never came out, Destruction Derby, and ESPN Extreme Games. If I remember correctly, it also had a demo of Wipeout on it, but it didn't have the music. And then here, these are just later versions of, these are all still pack-in demo discs that came with the system. PlayStation, they started calling it the interactive CD sampler pack. So like this one's got Mortal Kombat 3, Twisted Metal, and NHL Face-Off, so that's still going to be like a 95 disc. And here you've got the sampler pack volume 2. This one, MLB Pennant Race, Aquanauts, Holiday, Crazy Ivan, and Street Fighter Alpha. So maybe that's like early 96. I don't know how often they change these demo discs out. If anybody out there has more of like a better idea, then you know, speak up. Then here's another one that they called PlayStation Pix. I don't know why they switched back to calling it PlayStation Pix. I don't know. I got this in a trade or something with somebody. I don't really know what its deal is, but it's from later. Like it says 96 on here, but I would say it's late 96. It's got like 2 Extreme, which is the sequel to ESPN Extreme Games because they lost the ESPN license. The original Crash Bandicoot, NHL Face-Off 97, Formula 1, something called Spider, which I don't remember, Grid Runner, which is not that great of a game, Bubsy 3D, sadly, Black Dawn, Rebel Assault 2, Disruptor, 10-Pin Alley, and Blast Chamber. Next, okay, so this is the sampler pack that came with my PlayStation. This is still my original copy of Interactive CD Sampler Pack Volume 3. Kind of has that tie-dyed thing going on there. Twisted Metal 2, Crash Bandicoot. So someone's been making fun of me for the way I say Bandicoot, like it's Bandicoot. Don't worry about the way I pronounce things. Like it's like the most annoying thing to get on somebody's case for. NCAA football Game Breaker and Tekken 2. There's more on here than that. Like I said, Rallycross is on here. And it had Face-Off 97, I remember. It's just not listing all the games here on the sleeve. Interactive Sampler CD Volume 6. His little hand on it there. Bloody Roar, Parappa the Rapper, Hot Shots Golf, NBA Shootout 98. This one unfortunately has some writing all over it, Volume 7. Says Grand Theft Auto on it, so I'm guessing it's got that on there, although it's not listed on the back. The four it says in the back are Gran Turismo, Hot Shots Golf, Tekken 3, and Blasto. So this is probably 98. It says 98. Must have been early 98, though, if it had Hot Shots Golf on it. Here's another one, PlayStation demo disc. This is another, I would say, pack-in, I assume. But this would be from maybe 2000, because it's got like MLB 2001 on it, and Sydney 2000, like for the Olympics, and whatnot. Okay, how many people remember this? So, Sony partnered up with Pizza Hut a while back, like back then. Sorry, this video is just getting long. They had a deal where you'd order a pizza and it would come with a PlayStation demo disc. And I forgot what they called the promotion, but it doesn't really matter. But it was pretty neat because, like, you know, I would have done that. I never did because I don't think I really ordered pizza that much back then because I probably didn't have the money. But I think that'd be pretty cool. Like if you ordered a pizza and like here's a demo disc with some new games for you to try out. So like this one's got Crash Bandicoot Warped, Medieval, Metal Gear Solid, Gran Turismo, and Tomb Raider 3. I don't know if there were different versions of this disc, but I would think so. You'd think there'd be a lot of them running around out there, considering how many of them, you know, they were giving them all away with pizzas. This is a pretty cool one. The Squaresoft on PlayStation. Now they, for some reason, call it a collector CD, which I don't. It's just a demo disc. I feel like calling it a collector CD is kind of overstating things, but it's just got, you know, again, demos on it. This one's got Final Fantasy VII, Bushido Blade, Final Fantasy Tactics, Saga Frontier 1, not 2, and Einhander. And these two I also had back, you know, I got these back then. These are not, like, a lot of these I've gotten more recently, but the first one, like, this is one of those games that I got from my buddy at Software Etc. This is a Namco demo CD. This one has Time Crisis, Treasures of the Deep, and Ace Combat 2. And then this one I got from a buddy of mine. I don't understand how he got it. Maybe I never registered my PlayStation. Like, he had bought a PlayStation and registered it, but he was like one of these guys that would constantly buy stuff and get rid of it. And so he didn't have a PlayStation anymore. But Sony sent him this demo disc. And he didn't have a PlayStation, so he just gave it to me. I can't tell you what's on it because it doesn't even say anything. All it says on the back here is, take immediate action. Locate the nearest PlayStation game console. Lock all doors. Insert free, etc., etc. I mean, it's just, you know, whatever. I think that's going to do it for the games I've got. I'm not going to really bother showing, like, hardware. I mean, you guys know what a PlayStation looked like. I do have a bunch of PlayStations, though. For some reason, you know, it's funny because I got done saying, you know, it was funny. I said the thing about, like, you know, you shouldn't keep a system unless it's for at least 5 games. And, you know, somebody pointed out, well, you're keeping a Super Nintendo around just to play Super Turrican, which, you know, touche. But I also have, like, a lot of Super Nintendo games, so I figure, you know, it's okay to have 2. Super Nintendos for that many games. But also just because I really wanted to have an original model Super Nintendo. Like, it feels weird. It's like if you had a PlayStation, but the only one you had was the little PlayStation Mini. It would just kind of feel weird. But I still have my original PlayStation that I bought in 1997. It's very yellow because I didn't really care about that kind of stuff back then, and so it just like sat on my desk under a window and got just pelted by the sun every single day. That one's just in the original box in a closet somewhere. The PlayStation I have as my daily driver is like a launch model PlayStation. What is that? It's like a 1001 or whatever, and people always joke like, "Oh, do you have to turn it upside down?" And because that was common back then, you had to either turn a PlayStation on its side or completely turn it upside down to get it to read discs for whatever reason. I'm sure somebody out there knows the reason. For some reason, mine's fine, so I don't know. I went through this weird period. I know for a while, the value of those PlayStations went up because supposedly it had a better digital to analog audio processing chip, but then I think somebody else like debunked that, or I don't really care. I guess for a while, like, audiophiles were looking for original model PlayStations just to use as CD players, which just seems kind of weird, but audiophiles are kind of a weird bunch. So, but I found a couple in the thrift store. So like, I have one that I use, and then I have another one that needs a new, not a new laser, but the spindle is broke, like the little ceramic spindle. And I bought a couple of new ones on eBay that were supposed to work, and neither of them work. Like, they don't snap on. Like, they're just like the little hole in the bottom of the spindle is too big or something. So I don't know what to do with that. And then I have a modded PlayStation that my buddy gave me that has like a mod chip in it that I use if I have to play burn games for whatever reason, like for recording footage for the show. And then I do have a little mini PlayStation with the little screen, which is kind of neat. But, you know, if I'm being honest, like, you know, thinking about things that maybe I'd be willing to get rid of, that's the kind of thing that I'd probably be willing to, you know, think about selling. Because, you know, I've got a couple of the matching controllers, because it was like a different shade of gray and had like the almost like lavender colored, or that's probably just my bad memory, maybe it's just light gray or something, thumbsticks. And I mean, I literally never played that thing, but I probably got that back in the day when, you know, maybe that was before the PSP even came out or something. I don't know. Maybe I thought it was the kind of thing I was going to take to work and play there. I have no idea, but I don't really know why I have it anymore is what I'm saying. So maybe I should, I could get rid of that one, and I could easily get rid of the one that's not working if I could get it to work. As far as like any kind of cool hardware goes, you know, like I said, I've got a couple of those analog controllers, and those are kind of neat. I do have a Namco like arcade stick for it. It was the one that's, you know, that dark gray, and it has the yellow ball top on the stick and the yellow buttons. That's the only arcade stick I have. I think in the PlayStation launch video, there's like 2 seconds footage of me using it to play the Raiden project. But you know, over there in Japan, they used like softer springs in the stick. They're not as clicky. And then the buttons are like convex instead of concave, and they have less travel. And again, they have softer springs in them. But I don't take that out too terribly often, just because I don't really play that many arcade games. That's the kind of game, the kind of thing where if I was gonna play Street Fighter Collection 2, I would take that out so I could play it that way. And like I said, I have that Nedge-Con controller. That's pretty cool. And I have a couple light guns. You know, I have the Namco light gun. The name of it just flew out of my head, but the Namco light gun that goes with Time Crisis and whatnot. And then I have this weird other gun that I got that is somehow compatible with both the PlayStation and the Saturn. Like it has one connector on it that's like an L. And so if you plug it in this way, that's got a PlayStation connector on it, and this one's got a Saturn connector on it. And it's actually a pretty nice quality gun, but it's the only gun I have for the Saturn. So like if I want to play Virtua Cop or something, I have to use that one. But I guess that's probably about it. You know, like I don't have like the big analog stick, because what am I going to do with that thing? That's probably about it. Like I already said, you know, the PlayStation is just one of my favorite systems for the reasons that I already talked about. So kind of, you know, kicking myself for going so long without having it plugged in, because the PlayStation is something I could just play every day. Really, it's probably, on average, it's the most modern system that I play, which is probably why I still think the graphics are good, because to me they're at least, they look more advanced than like 16-bit systems. But all right, that's probably all I've got for this time. Still not sure when I'm going to do the next flashback episode. I don't know. I always think of lots of stuff to talk about, but this was the show for this week, so there's not going to be another one. So hopefully this got you out of watching some Super Bowl, or gave you something to watch after the Super Bowl was over and you're trying to get the beer buzz to wear off and to digest all the tortilla chips. So as always, thanks for watching, and we'll see you guys next time.